Alrighty, today's conversation is for the mom who is doing it all, raising her babies, building her business, going back to school, and still trying to figure out who she is in the middle of it all. I'm joined by Elaine Alexander. She is a registered psychotherapist qualifying in Ontario and on practicing under supervision. So Elaine works with adults navigating grief, including suicide loss, as well as relationship and dating challenges. And her work also lives as the intersection of AI and mental health. Before becoming a therapist, she spent 2 decades in entrepreneurship while navigating burnout, financial pressures, personal loss, and becoming a wife and mother in her 40s. So today we are diving into the identity shift, the loss of autonomy, and the capacity struggles that many of us carry quietly as moms and as ambitious women. So, we're going to be talking about what is actually happening in your nervous system when you are stretched across roles, and why willpower will never give you more capacity, and how to actually come home to yourself while still raising those little humans, while still building your businesses and growing into who you are becoming. So, this conversation I needed in my own season of becoming, and I cannot wait to hear from you all. But Elaine, I am so honored to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me,
So
Mackenzie.
you are navigating motherhood, entrepreneurship, and being a student all at once, and as an older mom on top of that. So what has the identity shift actually looked like for you, and where do you feel the tension most in your nervous system between who you used to be and also like who you are becoming?
Think the identity shift has been a 4-year long street fight. It's not been pretty. It usually comes with a struggle, right? We try to, at least I did, still do, try to grip onto who I used to be before I could let go and fully embrace it. And some days it's better than others. It's definitely not perfect. But I think as a mom, in my 40s, I had my daughter when I was 5 weeks away from being 41. I met my husband at 39. We got together and had a baby really quickly. It was planned. We both knew and we wanted it. And then it happened and it was COVID. And it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. The combination of perimenopause and postpartum is wicked. And I think that after 2 decades of building a life and all of a sudden it changes, that's a hard transition. And so I really struggled for a bit and still do some days. Most days, let's be honest. Motherhood is hard. Business is hard. I went back to school 2 years ago. That's been a challenge as well. And so, I went 5 weeks after my daughter not having any clients. And I thought it was going to be a year, right? I got ready. In Canada, we get a year maternity leave. I signed up for the EI program for the self employed thing. And I thought I was good. I was going to shut it down. I was going to be mom for a year. It lasted 5 weeks. One of my clients reached out and she didn't know I was on maternity leave. And my husband really encouraged me to take the session. And I was like, no, I promised that I wasn't going to. And he was like, I think you should. And after that session, I was a new person. I remember coming downstairs and my husband was like, oh, thank God she's back.
Wow.
And so I started working. So I would take care of my daughter from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then my husband and I would switch. And I would work from 5 to 9 and then I would go to bed. And I did that until she was 5 months old and I totally burnt out. And so it's been, a season of trying things, of figuring out what works for me, what works for our family, what works for my daughter. We ended up putting her in daycare part time when she was 5 months old, which is unheard of here in Canada because people get a year off, right?
Yeah.
And we put her in daycare for a few days a week. I was really nervous and she thrived. I thrived. It was the best thing for us. She's a very social being. The daycare ended up having a 5 month old. So they, had 2 5 month olds. It was great. But it's definitely been a season of trying to figure things out. And I don't think the identity is even fully formed. It's still shaping. And I'm okay. Come to a place where I'm okay with that. But that has also been a struggle. Where I feel it in my body is always here.
Really?
Right. For me, grief has been a huge part of my life, and grief sits in the lungs in a lot of traditional kind of medicines. And so it usually lands in my chest. Usually my voice cracks or I get emotional. And for me, emotional is usually sadness more than anything
So
else.
beautiful that you're, like, so aware of, like, your body, the acceptance of, like, like, your story isn't finished and, like, you're okay with that of, like, the highs and the lows of, motherhood and just life in general. I feel like that's what it really is all about is just, like, acceptance. Do you?
Yeah. I mean, I've done a number of different things in the 4 years since my daughter's been born, and things have shifted in different seasons. I think in the harder seasons, I have definitely battled it more. There was a season where I was shifting into something different. I had ended a contract. I left. It did not end well. I left. And I thought that I would just pick up and things would just start up again. And what I've realized looking back is that it was winter and I was trying to plant seeds when the ground was frozen solid. But when you're in it, you're still trying. And so you're going to, take the jackhammer to the ground and try to get those seeds in. And now that things are starting to flow and work a little bit better, I can look back and go, oh, well, that's why. But when you're in it, you're just like, I have to make it work. And so hindsight is great because now I can accept it, but it's definitely harder to accept it in seasons where things are not working, when they're not the way we want them to
Let's
be.
back up a little bit. I've usually opened up the conversation and having you also tell your story, like how you even got here. And you shared a little bit about, you getting married at 39 and having the baby at 40. But I want to know, like you said that you've had like multiple businesses. Walk me through that. Like walk me through like how you, met your husband. Have you always been in Canada? Just give me your elevator pitch of your life.
I've always been in Canada. When I was in high school, or probably first year of university, I was absolutely miserable. Ended up working in another province. And then I came back, dropped out of school, moved back to the other province, worked on the midnight shift for like $6 an hour. Just took a chance. And then 9/11 happened, and I had a job lined up. But in Canada, money got funneled away from the arts and into defense, and there was a whole bunch of budget cuts. And so it worked out beautifully because the job that I had lined up didn't get the funding, but I ended up having a beautiful 15-year career in business. I became a yearbook rep in Toronto, which is one of our bigger cities in Canada. And that was a business that was very much a franchise. So it was 100% commission. It was mine. When I left, I had to sell to two different people. And so I did that for a very long time. And I was really good at it, but I was burnt out and I had stopped growing. I had hit this point where no one could ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to. And so I decided to sell my business. But in that, there was burnout, but there was also loss. And so there was a few people that passed away my biggest year. There was three people that I lost that year. So all I did was
In
work
one
and go to
year, you
funerals.
lost three.
Yeah.
Who were those three?
It was my uncle, a business mentor, and then my cousin. The third person that year was also the third person in my family to die of suicide. And that, over a 25-year period, just completely leveled me in that moment. So I ended up in Ireland on a retreat, kind of crazy,
Love it.
and came home. And it took another 11 months, but I decided to sell my business and get out and start coaching. So I've been a coach for a decade now. I've done a lot of different kinds of coaching, and it was working. And then COVID hit, and COVID really, like everybody else, changed things for me. In May of 2020, grandmother passed away. Not of COVID, but she was old and had a good life, and she was in the hospital. And that same week, a few days later, my dad had a stroke. Yeah. He was in the hospital for 7 weeks, and we couldn't see him, full lockdown, the whole deal. And so he's okay. He lived. He had to walk again and learn how to talk and everything, but he's still around. But that meant that because I'd had these two family tragedies and I was single, I was living on my own, no one could hug me as I was going through this. And so I was very, very determined in the fall not to spend another lockdown by myself. And so I got back on Bumble after a 2-year break and I met my husband. And the story goes that I swiped, oh, hell no, the first time. And then he came back around. And so
I love it, though.
and it wasn't just no, it was like, oh, hell no.
Beautiful.
Yes, and he knows a friend of that ours officiated our wedding and put that in our wedding ceremony as well.
Love it.
And so I thought he was a rebound. He had just gotten out of a relationship. I was like, well, I'll spend somebody in the lockdown with somebody who was a nice guy. Thought he would disappear. And then 3 months later, we moved in together. And 3 months after that, we decided to start trying. And so it was really, really quick. Also, the world was locked down. So we spent a lot of time together. But our families didn't even meet until our wedding. We had a surprise wedding.
How
It
did your
was a lot of
family
fun.
take that?
It worked out, but there was definitely some tension with some people that
Yeah.
but we called it an engagement party and we got married.
This is
They are very happy. They love my husband. Everything's good. But it was COVID. And so we had a 28 person, micro wedding. It was beautiful. And I was pregnant. And the day before we had just found out that we were having a girl. And so we did the surprise wedding that was supposed to be an engagement party, but we got married. And then the person, a friend of ours officiated and she pronounced us husband, wife, and baby girl. And that's how we announced
I
that we were getting.
love this.
It was a great day.
Holy
And
moly.
as much as some people were not happy with us, we really made that day about ourselves. And it was just absolutely, I wouldn't do it any differently.
Yes. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
About you.
right. COVID was the best excuse for that because we had to cut down the guest list. And we really, if it wasn't going to work out that day, it was okay because no one knew. There was no expectations, right?
So I also have suicide in my family.
So,
Whenever, like, it happened to my father, so it was very, very close,
so,
and, I am like, why I'm coaching, why I'm an entrepreneur, like, I love my life more now than ever, like, I do see, like, those traumatic events actually being, like, a benefit that whenever it happened to me, there was only, like, one resource, and it was a book about, like, this Japanese man who had lost his father, and it was, like, great for the time because like, it was, like, relatable because I didn't know anybody who had actually, like, been through this, or if they did, they didn't wanna, like, talk about it. How did you take on that journey, and how did you kind of get through that? I feel like suicide is affecting families more than ever now, which is sickening. Even, like, children and stuff, full scope back now that you've been through this, like, what would you recommend for individuals there, and, like, how did you kinda get through that?
I think in my family, it was a little different. So I was 2 years old when my aunt took her life, and so I don't remember anything, right? And then when my uncle, who was my dad's brother, and they were very, very close, he took his own life, so 25 years after. I really struggled, but no one would talk about it, and I thought, "Well, they've already been through this," right? Because I was 2. Of course, I don't know how to deal with this. There's a lot more pressure around, well, they know how to deal with this. I don't. There wasn't a lot of resources. It wasn't anything. I remember my aunt giving me 2 books, and they were very research driven, very clinical, but that's all we could find. And so I spent a lot of time asking questions and diving into what bad things happen to good people and all of that kind of stuff. We have a program here in Canada. I don't know if it exists in the US, but it's called EAP. So it's an employer assistance program and it does mental health services. So I did a few sessions of that. But my counselor said, and I quote, "I think you feel too much," and then broke up with me. And so I really had nothing. And so when my cousin, who was their son, it was my aunt, uncle, and their son. When that happened, it happened in a year where I had my biggest year. I had my biggest business goal. All I did was work and go to funerals. It totally leveled me. And so I ended up in Ireland on a retreat after that to kind of deal with it and process it. But it is something that even the grief resources that I'm finding are not directly related to suicide loss. I think in the 12 years since my cousin, it's gotten a little bit better, right? We have a text line, 988 has been created. I remember watching an Oprah episode where Marie of Donnie and Marie talked about losing her son to suicide. That was the first time I saw somebody on TV talking about it. And so we're starting to. The thing that I had to kind of wrestle with was answering the question why, right? And what I've learned is that the brain really needs to understand a story, right? We process information in stories. And when I finally found peace was when I could find a story that my brain could accept. Because a lot of people also ask why. And sometimes there's no why that's ever going to make you feel better. You're never fully going to understand why, right?
Mhm.
But if you can find something that your brain can settle with, like a narrative, a story that it can tell, that can help. And so I really focused on that, and that brought me peace for a little bit. And then the part that made me realize that I'm really a cycle breaker in my family is that I decided to get up and share my story. And I decided to start talking about it because we hadn't talked about it. And there's a lot of theory, and I used to work in high schools. And so there's a lot of theory around copycats and not talking about it. And I said, well, it happened 3 times in my family and we never talked about it. So clearly this is not the answer.
Mhm.
And so I started talking about it. I wrote my story out and then I shared it individually with family members. I started talking about it. I wrote it to my dad in a letter and we started having really hard conversations. And I still get emotional about it.
Yeah. That's a beautiful idea. I'm gonna say this here for accountability, but once I read that book and got bits and pieces, but also from a very masculine, perspective. It is my goal to write a book that will help women specifically get through suicide. Like, that is my goal because I feel like that was a missing resource whenever I went through that. So, thank you so much for sharing that. I know like it is never easy. Like, it's been 4 years for me and like I still think about my dad every single day. I had to work through, abandonment-ish, from a
Yeah.
father, which cycled into my relationship with my husband, fearing that he was going to leave me because every other man in my life, my grandpa left my grandma. Like, it has seriously been a cycle. And so that's the cycle breaker in me that I'm like, I'm going to have a very loving marriage. Not saying like my parents didn't or like, my grandparents didn't. Like a healthy relationship with a man.
Yeah, I mean, when somebody chooses to leave in that way, it does bleed into every other part of your life. Of course it does. Those fears are gonna pop into our closest relationships. They just are. Right. And that grief is complicated. And there's a lot of resources out there for grief. But I think suicide loss is another category. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not your standard grief. And there's a lot of different categories that we really need to explore more.
Couldn't
Right.
agree with you more. And the surprising thing, I have 2 sisters, so there's 3 girls, and we have all processed it so differently, like timeline-wise. I will say that, and I don't know if you have heard, great responses, but one thing that really helped me was I remember my counselor, she would make me like walk through like the picture of like what the story is that I, saw or what I thought I saw. And then she would erase it, like, she made me visualize and then put all the good memories of my dad on there instead, and, like, that helped me get through my grief, like, tremendously.
Memory reconsolidation. So could it be EMDR or brain? EMDR is the light bar, so it's bilateral stimulation. Brain spotting and DBR are without the light bar. Hypnosis. There's all kinds of different things. The goal is always to neutralize the memory, right? And so it reconsolidates how the brain is processing that. The emotion is often attached to a picture in your head, right? And when we are triggered by something, it goes back to the picture and it hits the emotion. And so I've done some different things in my life, therapy wise and coaching wise, so that I can think of my worst days and they're
Feel like
neutral.
that's what I'm hearing repeatedly, going through my own journey is just like neutrality, like even with money, even with, motherhood, like neutrality. So however you get there, I know will look different for each and every person too.
And when it's neutral, you have choice.
Mm,
And when you have choice, you can choose to feel sad, you can choose to feel joy, you can choose to feel grief, you can choose to feel however you want, but it's not automatic. You have choice.
I love that saying. You have a choice to even have a good day or a bad day. When your toddler's having a tantrum, like you have the choice to either, increase the, emotion or stay neutral on it. I feel like that's what brought me my power back. One thing that I did want to ask you is, loss of autonomy is something like so many moms quietly grieve, but like rarely like name out loud. And how has your body responded to that loss across these, different roles with have helped you reclaim your sense of self without abandoning the people who depend on you?
I think you have to name it in order to be able to grieve it properly, right? Like so many of us are in a street fight, especially like I felt it. I went from being able to do whatever I wanted to locked down at home with a baby during COVID. So I couldn't go to the mall and walk around. My husband was also working in a loft in our home, which was great and also made it a little bit harder as well. There were no mommy groups. There was no going to the park. It was February. It was cold. And so um, one of the things that I did early on, and my sister actually told me to do this, was I went away for a weekend by myself. I went to an area called Wasaga Beach. My husband took care of my daughter, and she was maybe 3, 4 months old at the time. It was great for a lot of reasons. It gave him confidence. They are super bonded. I wasn't watching over. I got to sleep. And I came home and I realized that the world was not going to fall apart without me. Right. Last year in May, I did the same thing. I went to a cottage for a week. So 7 days, nobody, no husband, no kids, no work, no school. I was on a school break at the time and I was just me. And it was the greatest thing.
What did you do with
But
your days?
sometimes
I'd love to know.
I read, I journaled, I did some business planning a little bit, but I just looked at the lake and I just was. Ate when I wanted to. I slept when I wanted to. It was absolutely amazing.
My gosh, sounds amazing.
Yeah. And that's where you reclaim things, right? But before I left, normally I would do all the groceries and fill the fridge and fold all the laundry and make sure that everything was perfectly done. This time I was really struggling and I thought, you know what, let's just do an experiment. And I didn't spend the entire time on FaceTime with my husband and my daughter like I normally would. And so I did the opposite of everything I normally do. And no one was hurt. Like everybody survived. Everybody was fine. They had McDonald's 3 days that week, but it's okay. It does not happen every week. And I think that as an eldest daughter who's been over functioning for a very long time, I had to control everything. And so I wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't controlling
How
everything.
much did your body feel different whenever you, like, released that and let that go?
Definitely different. But also, I want to set this expectation because when you come home, you're different, but everybody's still the same.
Mm.
And so it definitely created some tension in my marriage. And for the last year, we've been kind of renegotiating. We've been through a lot of pressure and we've been through a lot of things. And so I didn't come home and everything was magically okay again.
Yeah, you have to integrate.
Was this, yeah, there's, and integration's messy, really messy.
So messy. I'm in integration right now from
Yeah.
vacation. I feel like we're integrating back to, like, our normal, life.
Yeah.
Like you said, so messy.
Yeah. And so taking some breaks, we've been through some money challenges. So before I would spend a night in a hotel, and this year that wasn't an option. And so one night I went to my aunt's and I just left because our daughter is 4, but she's still not sleeping through the night. And she also developed night terrors last August. And if you've ever been through night terrors, it's awful. And it happened every 90 minutes. And so you just have this child who's not awake screaming. And I definitely did not sleep for a long time. And so I get to this point where it's no longer safe, or my body believes that it's no longer safe to sleep. And in those cases, my husband knows me well enough to say, like, you need to get out of here for a day or two and catch up on sleep. And so looking at those different pieces, it's really been trial and error. And sometimes you're too far gone and you need to book a hotel room or go to a family member's and just get, a few hours sleep to be able to function
There's
again.
a New Testament out of the Bible, and I just have been reading it, and the first scripture is like the Thanksgiving prayer. And it is all about like allowing yourself to receive. And like, I feel like that is like the biggest hurdle, especially for moms, to just be like, I'm fine. Like this is just what motherhood is. And this modern day motherhood is just not how it's supposed to be. There was so much support when women get together, like usually their cycles like sync up, but there's like part of that village where some women would be on like this new moon cycle and the other women would be on the other new moon cycle. And it was because women would watch the kids and be the homemakers in this point, and then the other, they would share responsibilities, and that's just not the case now. So like, I feel like sleep is like such a foundation for moms and women. Like that was the main thing whenever I hit my burnout and talking to my, therapist. She's like, you don't need me. Like you need sleep. Like that's it. Like that's how simple it is. So like just allowing though your body though to actually like receive sleep though and like be okay with it. And like you said, like feel safe. Like I was the same way. Like my son actually just this week is sleeping through the night consistently. And it's because I feel like we went on vacation. I regulated myself, came back, and like, the integration, I think that's just so important. I feel like we're so pressured to like sleep train our kids. And it's like, that's just not normal these days. Like, I feel like more moms that I talk to, like their kids aren't sleeping through the night. So like that typically is like a mere reflection on us. So like something is, dysregulated for us. So like, what do we need to do to get to, the point where our bodies can feel safe so that we can all co-regulate? Do you feel like that?
I mean, if my daughter doesn't sleep, I'm a wreck the next morning. So is my husband, right? Like you cannot function in your job, in your relationship, in all the things that you have to do without sleep. And sometimes you can't get any. That is the reality. I worked when my daughter was 5 months old. I took a contract in a coaching program and I was there for 2.5 years. So I was coaching real estate agents and we really grew it. But the founder was male, had 5 kids, all of which were teenagers. And his wife was a stay-at-home mom and had never worked. And he kept saying, like, why is Elaine always so tired? And I was like, you hired a mom with a 5-month-old. What do you expect?
Mhm.
Right. If your kid is not sleeping, it's going to affect everything. And sometimes I get to a place where I'm affecting her sleep and she's affecting mine. And if I'm anxious about it, she's not going to sleep. And if she doesn't sleep, I get more anxious. And so getting out of the house to sleep has been the only thing to break that. And I think that I did a lot of mindset work and a lot of healing before I became a mom. And then I became a mom. And the only thing I can describe it is like a new software update gets installed when you become a mom, right? Like there's a programming that gets installed.
Yeah.
And I think
And each
I
kid
think the
too, which is
right?
very interesting too.
And I think that mom guilt comes from the belief that you are solely responsible for another human. And that runs deep. That is a pattern. That is a belief that is not true because my husband's just as responsible as I am, right? But it's not logical. It's not conscious. And it just gets downloaded. And working through that one has been a big piece, right? So my husband's like, what do you mean mom guilt? Just go away. Don't worry about it. And there's no understanding of and so that belief does not get installed in men, clearly, or most men. But with women, it's this like, oh, I need to keep this human alive. This is now my biggest role. And that can be a lot of pressure. It can create a lot of tension. It can show up in sleep. It can show up in a lot of different areas as
The
well.
more selfish I have been, like with my self and like caring for myself and putting myself on the pedestal even before my kids has made me a better mom and has made my relationship better with my kids. So like I am all for like throwing that mom guilt out of the way, but also understanding that, like, it's not that easy too. This has been, 4 years of, definitely like hard, subconscious reprogramming that I've been working on to like get to this point. But I feel like when we're talking to, other moms that this is a process and, you've been doing this like look how much, education and expertise that you have and like you're still a human being and, you still have your struggles too. How do you kind of roll with
Think often we wait to not feel the guilt to do the thing,
Mm,
right? So I want to go away for a weekend, but I don't want to feel guilty. Well, you're going to, and that's okay, right? Do it with the guilt. Feel it. It's not going to kill you most of the time. Hopefully, if it is, reach out for support. Call someone, and I think that we mindset is about building muscles. Changing those beliefs is about building muscles. And so the more evidence you have that things aren't going to fall apart at home or that, you can go away and it will be okay, the more that your brain will find safety in that. But that's not going to come right away, right? It takes some reps. It takes some growing of that muscle, and then the guilt won't be as intense. But it's okay if it is, because you know that you have the ability to deal with it. I tell most of my clients that emotions aren't bad. We often label emotions as negative or positive, and I really look at them as road signs. They are how our body communicates with us. And sometimes we need to stop. Sometimes we need to yield. Sometimes we need to go. And those emotions will communicate with us. They're data, they're information, they're signals that we need to listen to. And so, am I doing something bad by going away? Maybe. Maybe that like is the guilt that is popping up. And can I look at it logically and say, am I doing something bad? No. Is this going against what the programming is telling me or has been telling moms for centuries? Sure. Right. But do it and feel guilty anyways. You got to build the reps. You got to go through the emotions. I think sometimes we're scared of emotions because we think that if we start feeling it, we'll never stop. And all emotions have an end most of the time. If they don't, call a therapist, get into the doctor, do that kind of stuff. But most emotions, if you really feel them, will last 60
you
seconds.
should feel them because I feel like unprocessed emotions then turn into
They can. Yeah.
inflammation, health issues, things like that as well. So, such a key point. I feel like such a good point to kind of wrap everything up on it as well. If my audience wants to find you, which I'm sure that they will, so where can they find you and what resources do you have available?
I am a therapist here in Ontario, so I know that's not in your market, but you can find me at grieftherapyontario.com. And I am also on Instagram, so Elaine T. Alexander on Instagram.
Love that. Well, thank you so much. I just love hearing people's stories. I love learning about, your expertise and just your perspective too, like the road signs. I'm definitely going to use that for my clients of like communication, the body. Like there's so many nuggets from here. So I want to thank you for your time today and I can't wait to talk again soon.
Thank you so much.